This is Sheila Kay Adams, and here we are tonight. You can hear, if you listen, the night bugs out in the trees, the singing birds. And if you listen a little closer, now even though I'm here in Madison County, North Carolina, sitting on my porch on Esky's Ridge, Ghost Mountain, I'm not really at the Georgia Mountain Storytelling Festival because I'm here. And so are you, but it's all virtual. So, I'm looking forward to telling you a Hank tale after a while. I think so. If they don't come back. They come by here a while ago, and boy, tell you what, feels to me tonight like the spirits is walking and a talking. What was that? Oh no, I think they've come back. Oh no, oh, they're all around me. Oh no, no! Howdy, you really are in Madison County, North Carolina, on Esky's Ridge. That's what I named it anyhow. So, I'm not really in Georgia at the Georgia Mountain Storytelling Festival. I am Sheila Kay Adams, and you are here with me, as I said earlier. We're all virtual this year, and I am just thrilled to be a part of the Georgia Mountain Storytelling Festival. But I saved this story for, we were going to be fortunate enough to get to work with some of the schools there in North Georgia. And the kids down there, I taught school for 18 years here in Madison County, and the kids in northern Georgia and East Tennessee, southwestern Virginia, remind me of the kids, I grew up with, and my kids' generation. So, in my family, which is a big one, my daddy had 13, they were 13 children in that family, and 2 of them died before they were adults. So, they would all get together at a family reunion on Decoration Day, which was always the first Sunday in June, and I've never heard such storytelling all my life. The National Storytelling Festival is about as close as I can come with its hilarity and sometimes moving times. But in the telling of tales, there were a lot of family members that also told me tales, and one of them was my great aunt, but I called her Granny, Deli Chandler Norton. And all of us little would stay all night with her, and she used to tell us Hank tales right before she'd put us in the bed. And this story that I'm going to tell you tonight is one of the ones that she used to tell us. And she said, well, now there's an old house over there right after you crossed from Madison County into Yangtze County going up to the big mountains. Somewhere there around Burnsville, there was these 2 sisters that my mother said that them 2 girls were the prettiest she had ever seen in her entire life. And now, she was a midwife and caught babies all over this part of the world, and she actually knew a bunch of folks. And for her to say them 2 girls over there, the Harmon girls, were not the most beautiful people in the world. Well, now let me go back on that. You see, now Mary, well, she was, Granny said she was sort of dark hair, dark eyes. Her skin would turn just as brown in the summertime, and so, Granny said, I guess that Native American stuff popped out in her. And then the flip side of that was her 18-month younger sister, Katie. Now, Katie was beautiful. She had long, just thick, glossy, shining yellow sun, like the yellow sun, hair that fell all the way down to her waist, and had these big blue eyes that were just absolutely gorgeous. And I just remembered something Granny said about her hair. She said, you know, she had her hair plaited down in 2 pigtails one time, and my mama said that each plait was as big as her arm. Now that's kind of hair that Katie had. And she was a fairly tallish woman for the time. She was about 5'7" or 8". Now, the reason that I know that for a fact, my mother, Big Till, well, she was 5'11" tall. That's why they called her Big Till. Well, so she was slender, had the most beautiful skin. Oh, it was just like peaches. Little red, kind of peachy color on her cheeks. And every boy over there, they said, is crazy about her, and I reckon I can understand that. You know, Granny said, now, them girls was good girls. They didn't run the roads. And both of them would have been a good woman for a man to marry up with. They was going to inherit land. They did inherit their granny's place when she passed on. She was over 90 years old. And them 2 girls, since, well, there's, you know, gosh, I guess Mary might have been up 18-year-old or so. You know, she is edging in on being an old maid. And then there would have been Katie, about 16 and a half, and they were just, but you know, there's something about Mary. There's something about Mary that's sort of dark. She always seemed to, though her eyes is big, like a doe's eye. You know, they're big and beautiful and all. There was a little sly look about her face. Really bothered me. But now Katie, that was one of the finest young women in this whole world. She were a talkative little old thing. And she knew a lot. Now, she was as sharp as a tack, smart as she could be. Mary, though, now, she was one of them, I guess, kind of high-browed active, is what you'd say, because she kind of walked around like Miss Somebody. And Katie couldn't help it. She was just Miss Anybody. You know, she'd be just as friendly with a plumb blank stranger that she did not know as Mary would be to the preacher's wife that she saw every Sunday. Well, now, as you can see how this story's going, now, them 2 girls, once they moved out into their grandmother's cabin after she had passed away, well, they just started keeping house together there and doing their chores, and they had a cow and a big old garden. They canned a lot of stuff out of, and, well, they was doing fine. And about a year went past, and the girls was doing all right, though Mary was starting to get a little grim look around her lips somehow, you know, kind of holding them a little stiffer than she did. Because now she was close on 19, 20-year-old then, and, well, I guess she was aging on 20. So she was starting to think she might be an old maid or something. Katie never even give it a single thought. That young, they'd go to them little frolics they'd have, and her feet would fly across whatever floor she was dancing on. Whether it's punching floor or a plank floor, she could dance on them all and just look as light as a feather. And one night at one of them dances, you know, everybody over in that community, Green Valley is the name of it. Over there in that little Green Valley community, well, everybody knowed everybody. You know, they did. I mean, there's one little old store there and about 15 Baptist churches. They didn't, now, them preachers didn't cater to singing them old love songs like my family kept doing. But they had frolics over outside of Burnsville for a fact. And Katie would just, every boy there would be lining up all night long. They just stand in this big line, went from out the door, and all the other girls sitting there, nobody to dance with. So that goes to show. And she was as pretty on the inside, I guess, as she was appealing on the outside. And there at one of them dances, she had on a little yellow frock dress with little puffy white sleeves. Cutest thing you've ever seen. Just like a doll. Now Mary is sitting over there with the older women. I don't know why she wanted to do that. With her dark hair pulled back so high and hard, White raised her eyebrows up and she looked plumb unnatural in her face. But she was still a pretty woman. To the side, she looked like she could be royalty. You know, everybody says here in the mountains we're all related to royalty. Somewhere back in our family. Well, the way I look at it is everybody in this world right now is, if you go back far enough, related to somebody that's owned something big or something. But anyhow, through the door one Saturday night, they was having it in the old churchyard that night, frolic. They'd strung up lanterns around in a circle so people could see how to dance and all there in the dark. And he just come out of nowhere on this big horse, come riding up like somebody that you read in them papers about, out west or something. Had a big fine leather saddle on the horse, and why, we was all just struck. I know I was. That's a fine-looking man got off on that horse. Tied it there, next to Jim Long's store. Yeah, he's a good-looking fella. But the minute he got there and they had a big bonfire, I remember too. And by the time he got to where he could see Katie, why, he didn't see nobody else the rest of his life. He did not see no other woman even entered his thoughts when he met Miss Katie. That was a shame too, now in a way, because he had moved into that community and been going to church there. Now, he didn't look nothing in church like he looked on this night, though. I'll tell you that. I did not even recognize him. But once I saw who it was, I kind of felt sorry for Mary, because he had showed up at church. Didn't think him all that good looking till I saw him later on at that dance. But he'd twice in the last month, he'd kind of walked Mary back to the house. I don't reckon he stayed or nothing, but he did. He walked her up to the door, and I thought he was sort of interested in Mary. You know, her whole face relaxed down, and she looked like a young, pretty thing again. But then, see, Katie had been off up in Black Mountain staying with her aunt, who had got sick or fell, I guess, maybe broke something. Or anyhow, Katie rode up there on the train. And when she come back home, her first day home was that Saturday before the dance. And then, of course, went to the dance that night. And, boy, he just fell like a 50-pound sack of flour hitting the floor. And everybody at that dance noted. And I looked around once. I guess it's about halfway through the dancing it's doing. Trying to find Mary. And she's gone. Katie and John was that boy's name. John Harrow. Well, there's a dancing, and when they had promenade and go around through there, it was just like he couldn't look nowhere but right at her. And I reckon that would answer a question if anybody had one about why Mary scooted on out there. Went to the house. Well, now they courted for, I guess, probably 6 months. And then she come to church one Sunday morning, and on her finger was this little chip of a diamond ring. had 2 little gold hearts on either side. He said it'd been his grandma's before he'd moved on up there to Yancey County, all the way from Charleston, South Carolina, and ain't that funny. Brought his anvil and everything with him because he's a blacksmith. Now, folks, they weren't no better profession to have than a blacksmith back in them days. And he had a right good business. And so he asked Katie to marry him. And right about the time of old Christmas coming around, which was not December the 25th, it was not. It was January the 6th. Old Christmas. They married up. Everybody said he'd probably, or they planned to marry up. But I guess I give the story away, because when I was a little girl, I wanted them to marry up bad. But no, that's not how it worked out for Katie, Johnny. See, what happened was, the day come for them to marry up, old Christmas Day. And that boy had worked that fall, done the work of 3 men, building them a cabin and chopping wood like I have never seen in my life. Oh, it just does my heart good to drive by a house and see a big old pile, 3 or 4 rows of good wood stove wood stacked up there. Now, that's the sign of a real man there. And I mean, he had her lined up to where it went 2/3 up the outside of that cabin wall. And it was good wood, too. It's hickory and red oak. He aimed to take care of Katie. But now, you know that during that 6 months, before they married, after he'd give her the ring in between, do you know that Mary got to the point where she would not even acknowledge her sister's existence? I mean, she would walk right by her. She would never answer a question. She refused to help them work on Katie's wedding dress. And while they was out there in the little old branches all over the place, up there around home, turning rocks over to find little old whitewater pearls, or what do they call it? We just called it Sweetwater pearls. And she got to acting right peculiar. She tried to be gone all day long and would sometimes sit up all night outside singing old songs that had been forgot for a good reason for a long time, walking around in circles, only she didn't go around like a clock. Now that's a bad sign too, and I ain't accusing nobody of nothing. I'm just telling you what I heard. But she got to be an awful sad, sacky looking person, and that's true. And Katie was just blooming throughout that whole thing, that whole time. That child was so in love with that boy. Everything about her sparkled, just like it'd been polished brand new. And the young one, why, Lord, she wasn't, she was about 17, right in the prime of a young girl's looks, with a little sense on her as well. I think they'd have done good together. I think it'd have been real happy. Had some mighty pretty young'uns. That ain't the way it happened. Because everybody gathered up down at the church house. There's people come from all over the place, all the way from Irving, Tennessee. Somebody said there's a woman come up here from South Columbia. I guess that girl was known far and wide. She did do a lot for the church. Brought in flowers every Sunday for the church. When they was growing, of course. But they was all there, had been there. And the time come, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Nope. Johnny never showed up. And at 4 o'clock, people started to leave. And they were all walking out the door with their heads, you know, kind of lowered and looking down at the floor as they went, in their hats in their hands, the old men did. And the women were just so hurt for her. You know, they'd reach out and try to pet her, and she was just killed. Nobody could believe it. And you know, Mary wasn't even there. She stayed home. She refused to go. And when they brought Katie back home, she had cried to where her eyes was about swelled shut and still had the snugs. Well, now her daddy had a hot temper, and he got all balled up and said, I'm going down there and kick his hind end, leaving my daughter in the state she's in, and I'm gonna call him out for this. And you know, Mary just sat right there and had this little smile on her face, kind of keeping her eyes looking down and everything, you know, trying to act polite anyway. Poor little old Mary laying there with her arms resting on the table and her head laying on top of her hands, just a squall. Now her mama told me later that she knew it. She said, you know, people really can till die of a broke heart. They can. And I reckon she did. Oh, it was the coldest February, Lord have mercy. It snowed about every day. And she took pneumonia. And it went into her both lungs. And shoot, why, within 3 weeks she was dead. I guess it was up about February, and it had come an early spring. And the ground had thawed out enough, at least, for them to dig a hole to bury it. People don't think about that much. But they used to have to wait till the service trees bloomed on the top of the mountain before they could bury the folks that had passed away, from the time it froze hard till it started to thaw out. Said they'd stack them out next to the spring house until it service tree bloomed. So anyway, that February, it was warm, unusual warm, and so they were able to bury her. And there's a big crowd come to the burying. Mary come to the burying. She was there. She had on her mama's old black dress made out of pure linen. Her collar stiffed up underneath her chin. You know, they never even found a trace of Johnny. After Katie's daddy said that he was going to go down there and kick his hind end, he went down there. But there wasn't nothing, nobody there. The door standing wide open to the cabin he had worked on all fall. And his suit of clothes was laid out on the bed, and his boots all blacked up, sitting there by the bed just like he was fixing to put them on, get up on that big fine horse and go to his wedding. But there wasn't nobody there. Now, even though it was a warm kind of February, well, you don't have a door open in February for no reason. Said there's still warm ashes in the fireplace. So, I guess probably some robbers or rogues or something, roving element, come along and got a hold of him, tried to rob him, and maybe he fought him. Because now, there was steps going down beside the cabin down to the little creek behind the house. And you could see where that there'd been 2 sets of footprints. And there's awful deep sunk in the mud of that February thaw. And so you could see the boot holes. There's 2 people. And then you saw where they walked down to the creek. And when they come back, they had thrown something away heavy, the 2 of them had, because the boot heel weren't sunk down as far in that mud. So everybody just assumed he had been robbed and robbed, and they sold the house. And Katie died too, double pneumonia. So it was a sad tale. But now what was bad about the end of it worse even than I think the two of them dying, was while that young was laying on the cooling board laid out, Katie was, and as having the setting up, Mary stole that little ring off in her left hand, sure as the world. I know she did. I saw her do it. And so did the preacher's wife. And she put it on her hand, but she kept her fist balled up and stuck down in the folds of her skirt she was wearing. You never quite got a glimpse of it, but I know she got it off her hand. So, time passes, you know, went right along like it always does. And before you could blink an eye, there it was late April, 1st of May. And there, all across the valley, oh, it was a greening up. Beautiful spring. A little early that year, but it was still nice and cool there, settled up at the head of that cove where them young'uns, well, where Mary now lived, who had gotten awful strange. She stopped going to the store, paid a hired boy to come up, bring her food to her. She'd leave a list out for him to pick up, and he'd go down to Jim's store and pick everything up and take it back up there to her. She got pretty strange. Mumbling. But now, it come one night, there she was by herself, and she'd just fixing to, bank the fire up and everything, because it still got pretty cold up. Now, that's the bigger mountains up yonder in Yancey. Sitting on my porch here, right over yonder, you can see Mount Mitchell in the distance. And so, the spring had been a rainy one, but it had been warmer. And it turned off with a little chill, but it come awfully storm that night ever was. And Mary was just hanging the dishpan on a nail when they came and knocked at the door. And there's that big storm going on outside. And boy, lightning rolling across that ridge. Looked like the gods was playing bowling, them pins, trying to knock them pins down. Lightning balls were rolling across the ground. And Mary had just took hold of the oil lamp, and the knock come on the door. So she turned toward the door, opened it up, and standing there on the porch, right during the big flash of a bolt of lightning, she saw the form of a woman standing there. And she said, "Oh, Lord, have mercy." Now, she might have been kind of strange in her head, but there's nobody that is from the mountains. If it is late and you knock on the door with a real emergency, they will help you. If they hadn't already shot you and you made it to the door, then they'll help you. But she saw it was a woman, and she called her in the house. And immediately turned to to getting the fire stirred up again, because it was kind of chilly, and that woman had been out in that rain all that time. And she said out loud to her, said, "Well, Lord have mercy, you'll kick your death out there. Why, it's awfully storm out there. Have you ever seen such a storm come up like this?" And did. She went on talking like that for a while, and got coffee to boiling on the stove, and kind of wiped around. And that woman, she had told her to sit down, go ahead and take a seat at the table to sit down. And she realized that woman hadn't moved. She'd just come in the door and standing there, a dripping wet on her nice, clean kitchen floor. And she turned around to give her a piece of her mind. But when she saw what was standing there, oh, she balled her fists up and stuck them down in that apron she had on. Because standing there, dripping water and all sorts of stuff onto her floor, was her sister Katie. Now, they buried her in her wedding dress. But there she stood. I mean, hair was clotted with red clay mud. See it under her fingernails, where she'd clawed her way out of the grave. And, like, you could see down kind of rips in the wedding dress that they'd buried her in there. There was these worms, these big, like night crawler worms, just working their way around all around the hem, and her hands. Well, the flesh had fell off of two on her left hand, and her thumb on her right hand, and her, well, she'd been buried all that time. Poor little old thing. But old Mary, now I tell you what, she's cagey. She's clever. And she stood there with those hands balled up and stuffed in her apron pockets, and decided to take that in charge. She is going to take charge of this situation. So she didn't even flinch. She said, "Oh, my goodness. Is that you, Kate? Well, I've seen you look better. Matter of fact, I ain't never seen you look more worse." But, and she remembered what she had on her left hand. And all of a sudden, she weren't near as high and uppity. And she said, "Oh, Katie, honey, I'm sorry, I'm out of sorts." "What? Well, honey, what happened to that long, beautiful gold hair that all the boys used to be so crazy about?" Now, I don't know how this voice came out of that thing, because, why, its lips had been plumb eat off by maggots and whatnot. But the voice came out and said, "It molded away in the cold, cold clay." And Mary said, "Oh, well, Katie, honey, what happened to that peach skin complexion you had? I mean, it's like, well, to tell you the truth, I believe I see some of your teeth through that kind of skin thinning there on the side of your face, and your hair's kind of fell down off of." Oh, see white skull in there, Katie. And them little maggots are just a-working in your eyeballs like nobody's business. Lord have mercy, you're a sight to look at. Where'd all that go? And out of that thing came, "It all molded away in the cold, cold grave." Katie, I am sorry for you. I know that too. You in them little white satin shoes you've got on, dear. But I've got one more question I want to ask you, because they don't look like they're in good condition now. Just want to know, what happened to that little old ring that Johnny gave you? And from out in that thing's, where its mouth was supposed to be, came, "You got it!" And that is the story of Katie and Mary. Thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy.